Hello guys, welcome back to another Genshin video. Today I'm going to be doing a Sucrose guide for you guys. Sucrose is actually a really good animal 4-star, and is also a great substitute if you don't have someone like Kazuha or Venti. But even in some cases, Sucrose could actually be better than both of them. She's really good at transferring elemental mastery to your whole entire team and boosting your reaction damage by a crap ton. So in today's video, I'm going to go over her best artifacts, weapons, talents, and her teams. And yeah, let's get it started. So for people who don't know, Sucrose is an animal catalyst user and specializes greatly in transferring elemental mastery and grouping up enemies. Now let's go ahead and go over her talents. Her normal attack is just 4 consecutive attacks of doing animal damage, and her charge attacks like a gust of wind that she can push away enemies. But her normal attacks unfortunately have some of the lowest scaling in the entire game, so really you don't need to worry about this unless you're going for a main DPS Sucrose, but in this video we're going to be talking about support Sucrose. Now her elemental skill is just a quick wind spirit that pulls opponents towards their location. It launches the enemies upwards and will do AoE animal damage. This ability is great for just gripping up enemies real quick and generating energy for your Sucrose. And this ability gets even better with some Constellations, which I'll talk about later in the Constellation part of this video. Now Sucrose's elemental burst is really similar to his elemental skill, but it lasts just way longer. So Sucrose will hold an unstable concoction that creates a large wind spirit. While the large wind spirit is on the field, it will continuously pull in surrounding opponents and launch them. And this will do AoE animal damage. And of course, since she is anemo, if her elemental burst comes into contact with Hydro, Pyro, Cryo, or Electro, it will do additional elemental damage of that type. Yeah, so her elemental burst is really good at pulling in enemies and doing a crap ton of damage. Also, if you want to see, the duration of her elemental burst is 6 seconds, and it can get longer with Constellations as well. Her energy cost for the burst is 80, so it's quite expensive, but honestly it is pretty easy to get energy with Sucrose, so it's not all that crazy. Now her first passive is when Sucrose triggers a swirl reaction, all characters in the party of the matching element will have the elemental mastery boosted by 50 for 8 seconds. So for example, if you swirl Hydro, all your Hydro teammates will have the elemental mastery boosted by 50. And that goes for every single element besides Geo, because you cannot swirl Geo sadly. Now her second passive is even more crazy. When Sucrose's elemental skill or burst hits an opponent, she will increase all party members' elemental mastery by 20% of Sucrose's elemental mastery for 8 seconds. This one's quite straightforward, so as you can see, if you build a whole lot of elemental mastery on your Sucrose, you will just benefit your whole entire team's reaction damage by so much. So if you combine these two passes and want to boost for like example a whole lot of Electro reactions, it's actually crazy how much extra reaction damage you can do with Sucrose. And the last passive is when she craps character or weapon materials, she has a 10% chance to obtain double the product. So she's pretty useful in that regard too. And yeah, that's all for the talents. As you can see, it's really simple and really simple to use, and just benefits you so much by increasing your entire team's elemental mastery. And that's actually why in some cases she's better than Kazuha or Venti. And yeah, that's all for the talents. Now let's take a look at Sucrose's Constellations, because she does get a huge power boost from her Constellations, I'm not even gonna lie to you. So if you have some Constellations for your Sucrose, then you are in luck. Constellation 1 is the main constellation that actually boosts her power level by so much. Her Constellation 1 states that her elemental skill gains 1 additional charge. This 1 additional charge actually makes Sucrose amazing, because now you can use your elemental skill twice in a row. And if you pair up with a certain weapon, you might be able to do it 3 times in a row. So that's why this Constellation is super good. So I highly recommend that you try to get Constellation 1 for your Sucrose. Constellation 2 increases the duration of an elemental burst by 2 seconds. This is a pretty good constellation, but it's definitely not needed, so you guys don't have to worry about this. Constellation 3 increases the level of the elemental skill. Constellation 4 is that Sucrose will reduce the cooldown of the elemental skill by 1 to 7 seconds for every 7 normal or charge attacks that she lands on opponents. This constellation isn't too crazy for mainly support Sucroses, but in certain teams, this constellation could actually be really useful, which I'll tell you guys about in the team section of this video. But for most cases, this constellation isn't all that, so don't worry. Constellation 5 increases the level of an elemental burst. And a Constellation 6 is also really nice. Basically, it says that if Sucrose's elemental burst triggers an elemental absorption, all party members gain a 20% elemental damage bonus for the corresponding element absorbed. So for example, if you swirl Pyro with an elemental burst, your Pyro characters will get a 20% elemental bonus for Pyro. And there you go, that was just quickly all the constellations. Once again, I do highly recommend you try to get yourself a Sucrose Constellation 1. It's actually just insane how much better she gets with this constellation. So if you do have this constellation, you're in luck. But if you don't have this constellation and Sucrose gets on a future banner, then I recommend that you do try to get Constellation 1 if you want to build your Sucrose. And yeah, that's all for the constellations. Now for artifacts. If you played Genshin, you already know what artifact I'm about to recommend you guys. 4-piece Vero Desert Rare is actually OP on all animal characters, well, besides Zhao. But other than him, support animal characters like Kazuha, Venti, and Sucrose will all use 4-piece Vero Desert. It increases your swirl damage and will decrease opponent's elemental resistance to the element infused by her swirls. But if you don't have it, a budget option you could use is 2-piece Vero Desert and 2-piece Wanderer's Troop. Because once again, building Elemental Mastery on your Sucrose is highly beneficial. So if you don't have good artifacts and substats for a 4-piece Vero Desert Rare, then you could use 2-piece Wanderer's Troop and 2-piece Vero Desert. And now that's basically all for the artifact sets that you need to run. There's not really other good amazing ones for Sucrose, so those are the two I recommend. Now for main stats on your Sucrose, you want Elemental Mastery on everything. Literally all of these, your Sands, Goblet, and Circlet should all have Elemental Mastery. And look, I know I don't have Elemental Mastery on any of my Vero Desert Rare pieces. I haven't gotten one Elemental Mastery Vero Desert Rare piece. And if you don't believe me, just look at all these. Look at them! No Elemental Mastery in sight! This game sucks. But anyway, as I was saying, Elemental Mastery on all three of these main stats are highly beneficial for your Sucrose. On your Goblet, you could also want Anemo damage bonus, but it is a little worse than having Elemental Mastery. And then a great substat for Sucrose is also Energy Recharge, because her Elemental Burst does cost 80, so it is good to get some Energy Recharge substats on your artifacts as well. And then you could go for the usual crit rate, crit damage on the side, but always take priority of Elemental Mastery and Energy Recharge. And then try to get Elemental Mastery and Energy Recharge substats on your Flower and your Feather. So yeah, that's basically all for the artifacts. Just to recap, for the artifact sets, you want either 4-piece Vero Desert Rare or 2-piece Wanderer's Troop, 2-piece Vero Desert. And for the main stats, for the best outcome, you want all Elemental Mastery. And if you don't have an Elemental Mastery Goblet, then you can want an Animal Damage bonus, but just be aware it is a little less damage than having Elemental Mastery. And then for the substats, you want to prioritize Elemental Mastery at the top, then Energy Recharge, and then crit rate and damage. Yep, so basically that's all. Now for the weapons for Sucrose, there's actually a good amount of weapons you could use, but there's an obvious best choice for Sucrose no matter what. And that obvious best choice I'm talking about is Sacrificial Fragments. As you can see, it has an Elemental Mastery substat, which is already highly beneficial for Sucrose, and then its passive is actually insane. You know how back when in the talent section of this video, I said that her elemental skill gets increasingly good with a assisted weapon? This is the weapon I'm talking about. After damaging an opponent with an elemental skill, the skill has a 60% chance at Refinement 3 to end its own cooldown. And with this weapon, you can actually pop Sucrose's elemental skill 3 times in a row for some high anemo damage, and a lot of swirls and a lot of grouping up. So yeah, this is definitely the best weapon for 4 stars and even 5 stars. That's how good this weapon is on Sucrose. So if you have this weapon, then you are in luck, and I highly recommend that you build this weapon and put it on your Sucrose. And it does get way better with more refinements, cause then it will make the elemental skill cooldown reset more reliable. Now another free-to-play 4-star weapon you could use is a Map Mare, which you can actually craft at the blacksmith. As you can see, it has the Elemental Mastery substat, which is obviously really good for Sucrose. And then its passive is actually pretty good too, which triggering an elemental reaction grants 8% elemental damage bonus for 10 seconds, which can stack up to 2 times. So if you start swirling with your Sucrose will get anemo damage bonuses, and will just start increasing your damage over time. So this is also a great weapon for you to run on it. Another pretty good weapon for you to use on Sucrose is the Favonius Codex. Favonius Codex has an energy recharge substat, so it is pretty good for Sucrose to help her get her burst more often. In its passive, you hit a critical hit with Sucrose and have a chance to spawn an elemental orb, so you can get more energy for your team. So that's also not a bad choice. Now probably the most free-to-play weapon for Sucrose that could actually be extremely good is the Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers. On certain teams, if you run this, you can pop Sucrose and then switch to your main DPS character, and then that character will get so much attack bonus. Although it doesn't have an elemental mastery or energy recharge substat, this weapon could be really good at increasing your main DPS's weapon other than Sucrose's damage. And depending on the team comp and rotation that you do, this could be an extremely good weapon. Now, I don't know much about 5-star weapons on Sucrose, but I do assume that they are also pretty good. But honestly, you really do not have to worry about them, because these 3 4-star weapons and 1 3-star weapons are honestly all the weapons that you need to boost your Sucrose. If you want a definitive best weapon, I'd honestly say Sacrificial Fragments is probably the best weapon for your Sucrose. So yeah, that's it for the weapons. Now the best teams for Sucrose. Sucrose can fit a lot of teams very easily, and in general, you can put Sucrose in any team that needs an elemental mastery boost. For example, if you want Diluc and Xingqiu together, you can put Sucrose in there to boost the elemental mastery of your Diluc and Xingqiu and just have giant vaporized damage numbers. This could also be the same about, for example, Overload. This could be the same about Melt Comp, so if you're wanting like Hu Tao and Rosalia, and you put Sucrose in there as well, you can do giant melt numbers and increase pyro damage of your Hu Tao. There's a lot of things that you can really do. So my recommendation is to put Sucrose in a team that really relies on reaction damage numbers. So if you have a whole type Vaporize or Melt comp, put Sucrose in there, and your Vaporize and Melts will do a crap ton more damage. Also, putting her in Electro Charge teams is also really beneficial because your Electro Charge damage is going to go through the roof, and it's just going to hit crazy numbers. Now that's it for the generalization of her teams. Now let's go into some specific teams. I'm sure you've all seen this team before. Sucrose Xingqiu Beta Official is the most popular 4-star team to win Sucrose with. Sucrose is really good at pulling in enemies together, and Beta, Xingqiu, and Official are just really good at making elemental reactions for Electro Charge. And Official is mainly here for a battery for Beta, so you can spam Beta's burst a lot. And for this team, you're actually with Sucrose on field all the time. Sucrose isn't there to do a lot of damage or anything, but she's there to boost elemental mastery and do a whole bunch of swirls while your other off-field characters have their damage maxed out because of her. And like I said earlier, this team is also really great. Sucrose will boost Xingqiu's and Diluc's elemental mastery by a crap ton. Dion is here for even more melt and for some shields and heals. And then Sucrose is here for grouping up and boosting elemental mastery. You can also replace this Diluc with a Hu Tao or Yoimiya to boost your power damage bonus by a whole lot too. Sucrose also fits perfectly with a Raiden Shogun team. So for example, you're using Raiden Shogun and Xingqiu for Electro Charge reactions, and then Bennett's here because he's Bennett and just increases everyone's damage by so much. And then Sucrose can increase the elemental reaction damage of the Electro Charge and do a great job at grouping up enemies. So yeah, I think you get the gist of it. She puts in a lot of team comps that need help with their reaction damage, if reaction damage is the main feature of the team. And yeah, that's basically all for the teams. Alright, now I think it's time for a showcase. Before I do the showcase though, I'm going to show you guys all the stats of my Sucrose. My Sucrose has 1,297 attack with 249 elemental mastery. She also has crit rate of 8 and crit damage of 61. I know that looks super bad, but trust me, it doesn't really matter all that much. We have a lot of elemental mastery. And then my energy recharge on Sucrose is 186%. I will say though that throughout the showcase, Sucrose's damage could be way better and help out the team way more if I actually had Elemental Mastery main stat viewed as a Vanilla pieces. So when you see this damage, maybe multiply it by like 2 or 3 times, and that'll be your accurate representation if you actually have all the right artifact sets. So yeah, let's get this started. So I'm gonna pop it down. I'm actually gonna get Official. I'm gonna start grouping up all the enemies. As you can see, I just used my Elemental Skill 3 times because of my Sacrificial Fragments. And I'm gonna pop Betas, use the burst, pop the Xingqiu, and now use Sucrose just as a person who stays on the field and does a whole lot of elemental reactions. And as you can see, that it actually did a lot of damage, even with my trash artifacts. So if you have elemental mastery pieces, your Sucrose will do way better than mine just did, and mine just actually did a lot of damage. So yeah, she's really good and really helpful in boosting your team's damage. As you can see, my Electro Charge damage rate through the roof after using Sucrose as a main DPS and just staying on the field and swirling up a whole bunch of enemies for more elemental mastery. So yeah, Sucrose is pretty powerful. So that's gonna be it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. In conclusion, Sucrose is really good at boosting elemental reaction damage. She's just a really good and reliable 4-star support character, and if you have her, she can be really helpful at boosting you through the Spiral Abyss. I hope you now know what talents, weapons, artifacts, and teams to put your Sucrose on. And yeah, that's basically all. I'll see you guys in the next video.